My name's Glenn. I am a copywriter, an author, a podcaster, a speaker, a bass player, a curry eater, a Dr. Pepper drinker. I think that's the main things I do. I've been doing copywriting, which is obviously why people listening to this and watching this will be interested in me, is because I've been doing it for 15 years now, I think. I work for companies all around the world trying to persuade people to do stuff. And obviously I wrote a book that kind of explains how I've been trying to do that.
Awesome. And for anyone that's new to direct response copywriting, which is a lot of what you talk about in the book and in general, how would you explain that?
Yeah, so I've traditionally, a large part of my career, 10 years, I worked for Agora, which is a weird and wonderful and massive international publisher. And they mainly publish information about finance and kind of how to invest your money and all this kind of stuff. There's also like international living and all kind of health stuff and all this kind of weird stuff. But I worked in the financial side. And what's interesting about Agora is that they predominantly use what's known as direct response marketing to get customers and make sales. And to do that, they use something called long copy sales letters, which most people kind of associate with the old kind of junk mail we used to get and all this kind of stuff. But they're still very much alive and well. And it's these big landing pages like that have been now adapted and kind of co-opted by a lot of internet marketers and made to look slightly prettier than they used to be. But ultimately, it's a big old letter, a big old piece of content, ultimately, that is encouraging you to have a direct response to it. And all that means is that at the end of that letter, people are going to say, you're either going to give you the money or they're not. It's as simple as that. So that was where the direct response thing came from. And that's how it was previously kind of cut. And it was like, right, you have direct response where people are going to have a direct response and kind of pay there and then you're going to have indirect marketing. So then you kind of go into your Madison Avenues and your brand building and all this kind of stuff, where it's an indirect thing where you see a picture of a sexy man with a Diet Coke and think, next time I need a drink, I might have a Diet Coke. So it's an indirect response. However, I think part of the reason why I framed the book how I did was that, and increasingly as I work now for agencies and brands themselves and do different pieces of copy, so I write every kind of type of copy there is these days, I've realized that everything's direct response, because ultimately every piece of copy, every piece of content is looking to get some form of response, whether it is a fact that you remember it next time you're in the shop or what have you. You're always looking for a response. So I've kind of got a little bit older and blurrier with regards to that. But I think it's a good way of learning the fundamentals of copywriting to study direct response.
Yeah. And on the long sales letter that you mentioned, you've got an extract of one of your sales copy letters, and you really do mean it's long. It was like 22 pages, your sample.
Yeah, they are quite long.
They're very long. And you encourage people as an exercise in the book to literally write it out a couple of times. I didn't do that myself, but is that something that you regularly do when you see copy that you really like, and what benefits do you find?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I don't do it anymore. That would be insane. But I did, to be fair, I did do that. That's how I learned copy. That was one of the first things I did, was take the sales letters, examples of good ones that had worked through history, and actually sat there and wrote them out and did the kind of rote learning exercise. And I did find that it was very helpful as I dug into writing more. And I'd always been interested in writing, but you start to read stories of your Hemingways and all this kind of stuff. And pretty much all writers over history have kind of, a lot of them have encouraged you to write out the work of people that you think is good, to try and get a feel for their tone of voice, their turn of phrase and stuff like that. So I do think it's something you should do if you're starting out, if you want to try and go into like writing these long sales letters, particularly if you're looking to get into direct response. I think it's definitely something you should do, because you're going to have to eventually do that. I've been working on a letter today, which I think that the one I put in the book was one of my own, just for like copy guide that I did, but this is for a kind of big ticket item, and it's like up to 10,000 words already. So it's like 50 pages long. So it's huge. So you need to get used to writing if you are pursuing that kind of career. But even if you're just more of a short copy kind of person, I do find it beneficial to do so. Essentially, the more I think about it, and as I get older and mildly more experienced and potentially wiser, I realize that reading is probably the biggest kind of, but the best thing you can do to improve your writing. But it's not just about just reading something and just going, well, I've read that book, nice one, tick it off on Goodreads. It's about analyzing. It's about reading things critically. And I think it's the same with when you write stuff out by hand. You are doing that. It's forcing you to do that and take the time to analyze it.
Yeah, absolutely. And what either books or examples of good landing page copy or ad copy would you recommend somebody to study for good examples of persuasive?
Oh, well, that all depends. I mean, I would encourage you. For some reason, I always remember I wrote out, there's a famous American Express letter, which like described two people who like went to college or something. I can't quite remember it now, but that was one I did. And then one that said trout fishing spoken here or something like that, which was like this really old, weird sales letter. And I copied that out. And I mean, I don't know why. It was strange. It was like a strange rite of passage. But these days, I would encourage people to do stuff that you like. Like, it is about kind of trying to get you kind of put your own style on it as well. So anything that you like and you think, oh, that sounds good, I like the way that reads, is good to do. But then I think if you are, depending on what niche you're in and that kind of stuff, sign up for as much kind of email copy you can get, and look for things that you're seeing over and over again. Generally, there is a massive disclaimer to this because there's just bad marketing out there, but generally, if you're seeing the same offers over and over again, if you're seeing the same, certainly in the long copy world, if you're seeing the same letters over and over again, it's probably because they're working, because the tests have been done and measured, and so it's worth looking to those and picking those out. But ultimately, it could be anything. I wouldn't see a problem with copying out a Paul Auster novel. I mean, why not? It's more about getting different tones and kind of getting the feel and getting the language subconsciously going in your head. But otherwise, I would, look for within the niche that you most often work with, or if there's particular clients that you're with, look for the stuff they've got. Look for the stuff that's going out more than once, and look for that.
Yeah, it's a good tip. Look for the common patterns. Okay, I'm going to jump into some of and hi Helen, just joining there. Jumping into some of the questions that people submitted. There's one from David Miranda at Panfora on Twitter, and he's asking, is there a simple, repeatable process I can follow to generate persuasive content for a landing page or blog post?
Is there a template? There is a simple process, but it does require discipline and a little bit of work. But basically, if you look at any landing page, what you should be looking for is a good headline. Obviously, most people don't need me to go through the kind of basics that everybody knows about, from things like David Ogilvy's On Advertising and stuff like that, where it's all and people have regurgitated the idea of 80-20. Your headline needs to be there. There's no point in having the copy below it if your headline's no good and all this kind of stuff. So you're always starting with a headline. Well, I'll come back in a minute, but ultimately format, you always want a headline that is going to be interesting, disruptive, that's unique, that's got urgency to it, that's useful, and it's got some ultra specificity to it. And then you want to be building yourself, and this is something I do, so I've got a rough idea that I'm always going to open with a little bit of a story. I'm going to get in the benefit to the reader straight away, and then already be talking about the call to actions. But this is all a bit kind of like, yes, there's these formulas you can follow, and you can go online and like find templates and just look for stuff that you're seeing that works. Most of these companies that have popped up who like give you these templates, they're all just based on what they know they've seen and they've on aggregate have worked. What's more important is than anything, and again, I always like to give practical advice where I can, but you start to get the more you learn about this stuff, the more you realize that it's the kind of immeasurable stuff that's the hard bit. But it's all about the idea. So if you want a formula for like coming up with persuasive copy every time, the first thing you should do is not write any of that. Don't worry about the templates. Don't worry about what's going on the page. Don't do any of that. Just turn back to the client, turn back to the brief, turn back to whatever has got you to propose to write this stuff, and start asking them why, start asking them questions, try and figure out what is the idea and why would someone care about it. And you spend in the same way you'd spend 80% of your time on the headline and 20% on the rest of the copy, spend 80% of time on the research. Like, figure out what that idea is, what is the compelling thing, what is the benefit to the reader. Always be thinking in benefits, and what is the emotional benefit, not just like it's in the book and everything so people will be able to see it, but you've got your basic features that turn into benefits, but then how do those benefits actually emotionally affect the reader? So always be thinking in that, spend time doing that, and then when you've got that, just write as many crazy ideas you can for a headline, for a possible lead. Just let whatever you've put in your mind out. And then it's just a laborious case of just going through that, deleting them, seeing what sticks in your mind, and just rewriting them. There's a thing in the book where I say delete, write, delete, repeat. If you can, for a headline, if you're thinking about maybe potentially maximum 20 words, if you write a headline and then delete it, if you can't remember what it said, it's not going to have been a very good headline. So I find that it's good to actually literally on the Word document or on a page, write down the headline based on the research you've done, and then delete it and see what you can remember of it. And the stuff that comes through is obviously going to naturally become better and better and stronger as you go along. So the question was, is there a formula that you can follow for always writing persuasive copy for a landing page? I would say, yes, there are formulaic things you can always follow: headline, lead, proof, and then a push. So you can use the 4 Ps, which is promise, picture, proof, push. So you've got make a promise, put the reader in the picture of achieving that promise, provide proof of how they can achieve that, and then give them a push to actually take action, sign up for the thing or what have you. So if you just keep doing those 4 things over and over again within the copy, you're onto a winner. But that's all formulaic. The real way you can do it every time is by not even worrying about that. Just first turning around, asking why would anybody be bothered about this, and doing the research. It's the most effective way of always hitting it.
Yeah, that's a nice way of getting rid of the anxiety and obsessing with the framework initially. Just
sure.
Getting it out there. And on headlines, so Sana, hi Sana, she's commented saying, this is really good advice. I particularly struggle with headlines. Could be worth you talking about with headlines, actually, the 4 U's that you mentioned in the book.
Yeah, so this was something, it's really useful, and every time I mention it, I always remember one day in the office, a marketer came up to us and was like, this headline it's not got urgency in it. And we were like, oh Jesus, like, who told her about the 4 U's? Like, it's good, just run with it. But there is a massive disclaimer that goes with it, and I hate anything like there's like absolutes and like it's got to be this or it's got to be that. There's magic in copy, there's magic in persuasion, and some of the best headlines, most effective adverts in the world don't have any of these things in. But what you can use the 4 U's for is a great framework. If you're struggling with headlines, as you say, it gives you somewhere to look and somewhere to aim your kind of editing. So the 4 U's are urgency, usefulness, uniqueness, and ultra specificity. It's actually just specific, but they made it you because they're American and strange, and I can't say specificity, so it really annoys me. But it needs to be ultra specific. So what does that mean? It needs to, headline needs to have some form of inherent usefulness to it. If it's not useful, that people are going to think, well, why am I going to read this? It's got to be unique, so it's got to be different to what other people are seeing. So you're looking for that unique selling proposition. You're looking for, or rather, these days people don't like that, but they talk about differentiation. So something that makes it different. What if everybody's saying this? How can you say something different? Whereas the other one's urgency. Often you can find natural ways to add urgency. So why do they have to do it now? Why do they need to read this now? Why do they need to buy this thing now? Always a tough one, because sometimes if there is an urgency, people are like, oh God, do I have to make up another? No, don't add any form of urgency if it's not really there. But you can always research. You can like look for, right, well, why would this be urgent? Or you can add something to the product that would give it an urgent element and stuff like this. And then ultra specific, that's talking about the writing. So rather than saying a gun, you want to be talking about a Walter PPK. And that's because more specific details connect better with people. So we don't watch kind of just random vague television programs. We watch specific things where specific things happen and we connect to them. I always think of it in terms of The Wire, the program, which is, if you think about the language used in The Wire, it's basically about drug dealers versus cops, and all of the language like re-up and all this kind of stuff is all authentic, specific language that is used within the drug community of Baltimore. It's done like that way for a reason, because then everybody looks at it and connects with it because it feels real and authentic. So when you're being ultra specific, so when you're looking at your headlines, try and be as specific as you can. Keep nailing it down. If you look at most headlines, and I just thought of a good place to look for kind of stuff to copy out, but things like ClickBank and like these affiliate sites where there's all these things, if you look at the majority of headlines, they're all just the most generic kind of things, and they're not interesting. So always look to be specific. The other thing to do to test with headlines, if you struggling with 2 ways when it comes to writing them, write as much as possible. You kind of need to, no one likes to admit it, but if you want to be a writer and a copywriter, you have to write quite a lot of stuff. I hate writing. It's annoying and it's frustrating. My brain thinks faster than my hands. I can't get it all out on the page, so it's a slow process. It's laborious. No one likes the actual writing. Maybe the editing and all that kind of stuff is interesting, but you have to write a lot. You have to just keep writing different headlines, weird twists on the same line. So if you're saying one line, say it differently, and just add different words. Go for different ideas as well. So once you've written what headline that like is based on one aspect of the product or service, write something completely different. Test something. Always be testing and trying something completely different. Once you've done that, as I say, delete them. Go again. Just be doing as many as possible. Something will get out, and then you'll see one line that picks up, and you might kind of follow that down the line. So that's the writing. Then once you've done that, once you've whittled it down and you think you have got a headline, don't struggle with them yourself. You are just one person. Don't even before you go to the rest of your team in your office or the client that you're working with, go and speak to your friends. I always say, show Ruth, my partner, I will try and show other people, show real people. Are you moved by these words? If they are not, go back. Are they urgent? Are they specific? Are they interesting? So always just be testing to other people as well. Don't struggle in silence. Put it in front of other people.
Very
Made
good.
a lot of notes. Thank you.
Hopefully that makes sense.
Definitely.
Perfect. Thanks.
When it comes to, so all of these things for copywriting help the reader to be engaged. Do you think much about search engine optimization and SEO? Because there's always a lot of pressure for us content marketers to make sure copy is engaging for the reader, but also for SEO. It's a question that Jess had, so if you want to elaborate on that, Jess.
Yeah, so I check what I say before I like start making wild, bold statements about SEO and stuff. Yeah, so SEO for me is all about there's like all of the technical stuff about SEO, and people are very good and far cleverer than I am at like manipulating that stuff and getting there. I feel in my experience over like 15 years in this play, I remember the days of like just like a white paper and just like load it with the words, just go for it, and it's like da 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 keyword da 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 keyword and what have you, and that worked. And for a while it was like, yeah, cool, that's got us up to the top of the page. I think the common acceptance that it's Google have got a bit cleverer than that nowadays, and it's all about it's bringing much more in about page times and all this kind of stuff, and the actual flow of the words. You've got things like Grammarly that's telling me that my writing's not very effective, and I'm like, it's made millions of pounds. What are you saying? Like, who's working this out? But you've got all of this kind of stuff, and therefore, for me, so this is my overarching thing. I think when it comes to SEO in content, and I do a lot of content creation that aims to increase SEO of companies, and it's very effective. But when I do that, I will start with the research around the keywords, so I understand roughly where I'm going and what we're trying to get targeted for. But then I will kind of put that away, and then I will write a piece of content that provides value, that is engaging, that has the right tone of voice for that particular client, and I will write the piece of copy. I will use all of the same techniques and what have you that I would use for whether it's a long copy sales letter, a Facebook ad, or or my novel. Do I use the same techniques? I don't know. I'll hold that back for now. But I would establish all these things and write a good piece of content, or a good, engaging, valuable thing. Then I will go through, and if I can add in obvious like elements of the keyword, I will put it in there and what have you, but not to the detriment of the thing. I will take the risk. I will encourage my clients to take the risk that if we can engage the people on the page longer through actually writing it and then provide a call to action as well, that will ultimately have a better effect for them. As I say, I'm also someone who doesn't like absolutes. So there's a lot of like stuff said about SEO, and there's a lot of the technical side, which I've spoken to really good marketers who kind of know all this stuff and know the little tricks. So there is all of that. But my gut feeling, and also from a purely like philosophical, moral standpoint, is that I only want to write stuff that is interesting and engaging. So yes, you might be able to say like the keyword 20 times more in that piece, but is it good to do and is it nice to read? No. So ultimately, I don't think that person who comes in and reads that will like you as much. So I would always lead with the writing and the engagement. I don't know what the question was. I don't know if that answers the question.
That's it really well. Yeah, that's covered. No, it's refreshing to hear that, because a lot of people get hung up on keywords, and I think sometimes it distracts you from the story. So yeah, like say, it becomes about keyword stuffing instead of actually creating something that's readable. And
yeah, I always think that the keyword stuff, like I know that like Who's the Man with the Jumper, that whole that ask the weirdo with the jumper, what's it called?
Not new. I know which one. Ask the Public, is it?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, Public.
So like stuff like that, and like doing the keyword, for me, I find that helps for me it's before the writing. It's the what shall we write about, what shall we create content around. So establish the keywords, doing all that stuff, and that's really useful. And then when it comes with any SEO, I do think it's long term, and I think it's a long term play that you should be doing, and therefore you want as much and many ideas as possible. So I think it's just use all of that, all the technical side to inform the content, and then let the content naturally flow from that. Don't be so like ridiculous that you're like, no, I'm not saying this word. I don't want to say the word because it's not right. It's like, no, come on, we need to get people like searching and finding this. But I do have faith in the Google's ability to find like authenticity in work, because I think they have to, because that's what defines them. The whole Google thing is that you trust Google, and if you don't trust Google, Google loses. So it will increasingly, the algorithms and that will get more intelligent based on finding what's real and engaging people. I have to have that faith. I'll just start crying every day.
I think we're moving away from clickbait kind of headlines and getting to the real stuff. So
yeah, yeah. I mean, clickbaits are like a weird phrase. I think I saw someone on Twitter saying this the other day, and I kind of felt the same, because I used to work with someone in legal who's a lovely person, but they basically saw everything I did as clickbait. And I was like, no, being a copywriter is not / clickbait writer. It's like, for me, it's like, there's no such thing as, no one like notices, people only notice bad copy. Like if it's bad and they go, fuck, I hate that advert. But if they see an advert that they like, they don't go around going, oh, I hate that, I like that advert, kind of thing. And it's the same with clickbait. It's like, if something's good and it gets you and it's like, yeah, that's really good, that's a good thing. But if it's clickbait and it goes somewhere that is meaningless and pointless, then that's a big problem. Totally agree. Clickbait is a strange word.
To your point on bad copywriting, what would you say are the biggest mistakes that people make, most common?
Biggest mistakes people make, they write copy.
Yeah.
Is the most obvious one. People go out and write copy and make it look like copy and think, how can we make this persuasive and thingy and all this kind of stuff? That obviously sounds like it goes against everything I'm saying, because that's what you try and do. But the best thing to do is to always write. If you're working on the idea, you're trying to get to a point of absolute authenticity where you are just excited about the product or service that you're writing about. And if you do that, it doesn't mean you write in a 10-point size font headline. I don't know why I'm doing that for 10-point size, because 10-point size will be that big. A 72-point size font headline saying, this is this. Like, that's not how people think. Like, it might end up like that when you do the thing and you do the testing, but don't try and write copy. Try and persuade someone and explain something to someone. One of the first things I was told by Bill Bonner, who runs Agora, well, he doesn't run it, he owns it. I can't imagine he does much running of it these days, but seeing as he's actually stuck in Argentina at the moment. But the first thing, it was speak to people like you sat on a bar stool at the bar, the bar stool test, saying, hey Bob, did you know you can do this? And it's that kind of mentality that good copy flows from. If you sit there going, right, how do I persuade this person? How do I use the keywords? How do I do this stuff? You're going to write a load of crap. So bad copy is that. Bad copy is also, it's also when it just doesn't, this again, the older I get, I'm more aware of me saying these things, and it sounds too fluffy, but it's just when you don't care, when you can see that it's just doesn't care about the outcome of the thing. There's no empathy in it, and you can see it miles off. It's like, we've got this, we've got this, we've got this, we've got this. A lot of wheeze, all that kind of stuff. A lot of wheeze, that sounds weird out of context. A lot of weeing, a lot of urinating. No, there's a lot of wheeze in the stuff, and it's, we're doing this, we're trying to justify ourselves and all this kind of stuff. It shouldn't be like that. The letter I've been writing today, I realized it was kind of coming a little bit easier than I thought it should be. And then I was like, oh God, like, and I took Pablo for a walk thinking, this is coming quicker, I'm not doing it properly. And then I just thought, no, it's because I actually just believe what I've just written, and I'm just saying, this is this. Like, I'll have to go through it again to make sure I've got enough kind of the other techniques that you can do and it's worth putting on. But ultimately, bad copy is just when it's just trying to justify it to yourself. You can always tell when someone is trying to justify the sale to themselves rather than like putting their arm around the reader and going, this is why you need it, kind of thing. So yeah, I think that's bad copy. What else is bad copy? I don't know. Reversed out copy is always bad. I've always been a stickler for that. I see it so often. So where you've got like white text and a black background, or the other, like that kind of, like, old people cannot read that. So don't do it.
White text and a black background. I'm sure there's a few of those in your book.
In my book, there probably is. Yes, there is at the end, the little blocks. But I blame that on the publisher. That's my right to blame this.
It works in that context. Nice little snippet.
That's good. Point out hypocrisy, please, because I need to check it.
Got a question from Rory, which I'll let you elaborate on, Rory. But your question was, what are some of your favourite long-form advertisements, past and present, that everyone should study?
So I would say the good ones to go after would be anything Gary Halbert. A lot of people in the advertising world don't know about Gary Halbert, which is it's a shame because he's very good. He's also a little bit, I don't know, he's like a Hemingway character. I mean, he looks like Hemingway, like old bearded fishing Hemingway. And I get the impression he would probably not fare well in today's society, because I think he was probably quite old fashioned and probably a bit of a dickhead. He might not have been, I don't like speaking the other thing, but he was a very, very good persuasive writer. And there's a thing called the Gary Halbert Letters, which you can go search, and there's all of his old stuff there. It's very natural and interesting and authentic, and it helped me a lot when I started out. So they're good. I still think I don't like remember. Well, there's whole letters I remember, and there's stuff like there's a letter called The End of America, which is very effective. So it's obviously good. Is it my favorite? I'm not sure. There's a famous letter that Bill Bonner wrote to sell International Living magazine, which was his first kind of venture. And it starts with this picture of like you're in the garden looking at the gardenias and all this kind of stuff. And the language is almost too fluffy. Like you'd probably, if a junior copywriter handed that in, they'd just be told to like throw it out and delete it. But I always just remember how ludicrous that was when I first saw a long copy sales letter. I was just like, really? Like this, get lost, this doesn't work. But like, so I always remember that. I remember my friend James Woodburn, who runs an Agora division in Australia now, he once wrote a headline that just said run with 3 exclamation marks. Now I hate exclamation marks. And like, I think it was, is it Marlon James, the guy who wrote Brief History of 7 Killings? He like teaches creative writing, and he said he allows his students 1 exclamation mark every 100,000 words. And he'd calculated that in his course, you basically write 100,000 words. So like you allow 1 exclamation mark. And I like that principle. And Fitzgerald was, I think he was the one who said it was, it's laughing at your own jokes. So I hate exclamation marks. And then Woody just held up this headline. It just said run with 3 exclamation marks. I thought, are you taking the mick? But that worked really well. So I remember that letter. But yeah, I don't know, there's just moments in different ones, so it's hard for me to kind of say the good ones. Plague of the Black Debt is good. That's like more of a classic thing, which is like it's a book, which people think is a book, which was written by Jacob Rees-Mogg's father, William Rees-Mogg. It wasn't, it was written by a copywriter, and it's a sales letter, but people think it's a book. But that's very good and effective. I'm trying to think of other ones. I'm thinking of, there was a health letter that had, I don't know if I've now made this up, but it was something like piss like a fire hose or something like that. And it was about for people struggling with like impotent, like not being able to wee and everything. And that was the headline. So that was like, wow, what the hell have you said? So anything that's kind of like really sticks in your mind, I do like. I don't know if that answers the question. Rory knows far more good letters than I do anyway.
Did you have any follow-up questions to that, Rory?
He put a thumb up on his thing. No one knows.
No, it was all very good.
Perfect. What are you reading at the moment that you found either inspiring or good copy?
What am I reading at the moment? I'm reading, do you know what? I'm reading 3 books at the moment. And I'll tell you why, and maybe you'll be able to learn something from this, I don't know. But Ruth, my partner, absolutely loves My Struggle by Nausgaard. I don't know if anybody's come across this, Karl Ove Nausgaard. It's like this big literary sensation. It's basically a modern Marcel Proust, In Search of Lost Time. It's like 6 volumes of this guy who's basically just sat there writing his life. And she loves it. And she's saying, you should read this, you should read this, you should read this. And I remember an editor, I used to work with Agora years ago, gave it to me and said, you need to read this, Glenn, it's fantastic. So everybody's telling me to read this book, and it's big, so always annoying when I like to read a lot. But I started reading that, and I got about 150 pages in, and I think it's about 700. And it's good, but I'm kind of like, oh, I don't know. I'm just going, why you're having your natural reaction, which I say everything is all right, basically, which means I'm just like, yeah, it's all right, like, it's fine. And she's like, oh, come on, I thought it's great. Like, why don't you like it? I thought, well, I kind of do, but it's just not gripping me. And I've been desperately trying to figure out why it isn't gripping me. And my best example so far, it grips like Zadie Smith's, and like all the best writers in the world think it's amazing, but it wasn't gripping me. And I can't decide if I'm just an idiot, I'm not reading it properly, whether I'm a genius and I've got like some like higher level of understanding of copy or whatever, or whether it's just not my thing, or what have you. But I think it's because it's not going anywhere. It's not got like a plot to it, really, and the writing hasn't got a certain electricity to it. It hasn't got an urgency to it. So I've paused that, and I constantly, I've got whatever the strange phrase is where you buy books. I'm just constantly buying books. So I picked up this thing which was written in, I can't tell you the name because it's a weird name, but it's this Brazilian author. He wrote it in 1881. And it's like this weird experimental novel. It's called The Posthumous Memoirs of Brass Someone or something. And I'm still I've been reading about the guy who wrote it. Like on the back of the thing, Philip Roth, Dave Eggers, like all these like writers, like one of the most experimental best books in the world. I'm like, why has no one ever told me about this? Like I've got a lot of books you can see here, and I've got more in the house. I've read all of it, but I've never come across it. Written in 1881. So I started reading that, and it's alive. It's like, wow, this writing's really interesting and engaging and getting me. So now I'm like, right, why is that Carlo stuff not getting me, and why is this getting me? And it's something to do with that urgency, that physicality of the writing. And so I think that's quite interesting. And then today, because I was downstairs and I was taking an hour off, I started reading Zadie Smith's like lockdown essays called Intimations, which are which I'm now saying, right, how is that written? And they're quite good. Ruth came home and was like, oh, you're reading that, how is it? And I was like, yeah, it's all right. So I did my all right reaction, where I didn't kind of go, yeah, it's really good. And I was like, yeah, it's all right. Feels a bit pretentious. It's a bit slow. It's a bit wobbly kind of thing. So those 3 examples of books in a long way around is like just showing that when you study writing, when you're reading stuff, like try and figure out how you're reacting to it. Like what is it about that Carlo stuff that I'm not kind of gripping me, whereas the Brazilian book is exciting me. The most recent book that I was most engaged by was by Charlie Kaufman, the crazy film director, and it's called Ant Kind, I think. And that is a mad, messy book. Like technically it's wrong and messed up and whatever, but it was like brilliant and engaged me and got me and was talking to me. It was a thing. So I'm always, whenever I'm reading, trying to figure out like what is it about that copy. And that's what I was saying earlier about the idea of like reading actively and kind of trying to figure this stuff out. The danger, there's a caveat to it, because Ruth always points out that I am now the most boring man in the world, and we sit there watching like The Fall or whatever this TV series is that we've just been watching, and I'm going, no, that's not really, that's blah, blah. And I'm just analysing it like a commentary all the way through, and she's going, Brian, shut up, just watch something, just read something normally, will you? But I find that really good writing does get you to like read it naturally. And that's when, so you kind of remember afterwards and go, oh, that was really good, actually. I really enjoyed that. So go back to it and figure out why it was good. But when you kind of stopped and getting those critical things, spend time in them as a copywriter, as a content writer, that's what you should become obsessed with and trying to figure that out. So really long answer and boring answer to the 3 books I'm reading at the moment. But I would go and read the Charlie Kaufman one. That's really good.
And when it comes to engaging copy online, in your book you speak about the importance of having short copy. That's extra important with digital devices.
Yes, yes. So like it's the basics thing. Like short copy is good, but you can't do it too much because then you'll sound like a robot. So you need to have long flowing sentences within that, but ultimately you want to keep yourself. I'm obsessed with the rhythm of language, and like if you're doing a few short sentences and breaking stuff up, you should, but then you need to be dropping stuff in that flows and keeps the thing. It's all about pacing ultimately, really, when you're looking at sentence length, and there should be a natural flow of if you're trying to persuade someone to keep reading. A lot of content, specifically like content, and I'm thinking in terms of SEO content and stuff like that, as we've seemed to have agreed, is about keeping people on the page, keeping them engaged. So really each line is getting you to the next line. You're not trying to sell anything at that point, like on a 10,000 word sales letter. You're not trying to sell on the first page. You're trying to get them to read more so that they become convinced. And I'm working on a novel at the moment, which is, this is where this does come in, and you're trying to pace things, and you're trying to echo emotions through the pacing of a thing. If you told a suspenseful thing really quick in like really slowly over a long thing, and was losing your kind of will to live as you're going through it, you want that to be like, oh, there's something going on here. So it's all about that kind of stuff. So it's a balance. I still do believe that the reason I'm able to do it inherently now, it seems, is because for many years I was beaten up to do the FK score and all that kind of stuff. If you've not come across that, a lot of people hate it, but if you use the Flesch Kincaid score, you can get it in Word, and you want to make sure your copy is below 8. The way you do that is by having a combination of clipped sentences and longer pieces. But yeah, again, it's balance, but certainly break stuff up. More white space around your copy, the better. If you see like my emails and stuff that I do, there's always like loads of bits around it, but sales letters I've increasingly got down to like clip things. But even if you look like a more like on the kind of brandy kind of top line, like out there advertising world, that rather than like the dark world of like direct response and Agora and stuff, but like someone like Dave Trott, if you read like, why does everybody love Dave Trott stuff? It's all written in literally a line, and then there's a paragraph break, a line, then there's a paragraph break, then there's a line, then there's a paragraph break. So it's all spacious, and you're letting the writing breathe, which sounds very like fluffy, but that's what you need to do. You need people to, if something looks like it's hard to read, you don't read it. Simple as that. If you that's why you want all of that white space. It needs to look easy to read.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking the way the words look on the page as well as the actual content. Conscious of the time here, I've seen that's gone so quickly. Does anyone on the call have any questions for Glenn?
My falafel will be ready soon.
Yeah, you've got 7 minutes to your falafel. I'll ask some of the other questions that people have. So another one from Jess, actually. She said, how often should we be thinking about, actually, do you know, you've just answered this question, so I'm not going to answer. I had a jazz question. You said you wanted a question about jazz.
Oh, yeah.
Someone who's new to jazz, what should they be listening to? What's some introductory?
Do you know what? When I thought she's gonna ask me a question about jazz, I thought she's gonna ask me what to listen to, and I prepared an answer actually. You should listen to a guy called Jeff Parker. He is from a band called Tortoise. The band Tortoise, like a jazzy kind of experimental band from Chicago who are really good anyway. But Jeff Parker has released a few records, and my favorite is called The New Breed, and it's modern, cool, really funky, catchy. Yeah, anything by Jeff Parker. He's a genius.
Okay, I'll have that on the background work playlist tomorrow.
That might not be the best thing to do, but I don't know if it's good background music. It might be a bit intense in your ears. I work in silence generally because I do listen to music, so I get too engaged in the music. But Ruth often comes in the kitchen while I'm cooking and it's like, what the hell is this that you are listening to? And it's often Jeff Parker, and it's kind of like crazy. So be careful. That's all I'm saying. You might create some really interesting content listening to it.
Yeah, I'll let you know. Let's check it out. Okay, more questions that you've missed there. You've answered that one. I guess another question would be, what's your day-to-day process when you're sitting to begin writing? What does that look like? What are your writing rituals?
So my my bath is where it often all begins. I do have a bath almost every day. It sounds preposterous, almost perverse, but I find that it allows me to think. Rather than having a bath, because our water bill is insane, I would just encourage people to, before you sit down to write, go away and think first, like move around. Basically, the thing that slows you down and makes writing hard is not knowing what to write. So for me, it always comes from, I have a simple scheduling system. I use Asana, but there's all these different ones, and I know what I'm doing that particular day. Therefore, I will wander around the house thinking about it first, do a bit of research on my phone, maybe make some notes on my phone. I do write copy on my phone, which people find a surprise, but it's just because I'm there in the moment doing that, and think and figure out what I'm doing. So as soon as I've got that, I will then sit down, write for an hour maybe, and then have a cup of tea, break it down, and then get it back in my mind. And I think I write about this in the book, but I've spoke about it before, but I do believe there's a certain like helpfulness if you physically like attack the page, if you get stuff worked up into you, so you know what you're writing, so you want to get that first line. It's often about getting that first line down. If you can like get it, so you're like, oh God, I know what I need to write blah, blah, and then like literally run at the computer and sit down and start writing and try and get that energy and excitement in the writing, and that will somehow, using magic, get to the reader as well. And I find that where people compliment my writing, it's often the bits that I've kind of written in the most excited way. So I would always try and think first, leave the writing until the last minute, until you have to go and write that thing, is probably the best way of doing it. And I just repeat that process all through the day until I realise that it's come home, or that I can justifiably go to the pub.
Awesome. I think that is, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but have you got any final nuggets of advice, or anywhere that people can find you if they want to?
They can find me in Grimsby, but no one's coming to Grimsby, so I don't worry about people finding me there. No, you can find some ramblings from me at allgoodcopy.com. You can find me on Twitter, allgoodcopy, and I like talking to people and like engaging, so always say hello. You can email me. You can find that allgoodcopy@gmail.com. You can buy the book and get hold of that if you haven't got that, or you can buy the book for someone else. Buy like 15 copies of the book, like Gary Vaynerchuk used to encourage people to do. But yeah, otherwise, my biggest, as I say, I've kind of become this person that now, because of the book and stuff, where like people ask advice all the time, and you increasingly realize that your advice is boring and pointless and really plain, but it's just, you've just got to read loads and then just write loads. It's as simple as that. And if you just keep the like practice, now I do sound like a James Altucher or Gary Vaynerchuk, but like those daily practices of like just doing the thing, and so long as you just do it a little bit, even if you don't do it loads, just do that little thing each day, you do tend to realize after a while you're kind of doing something useful. But other than that, as I say, it's the same as what I said. Don't write until the last minute. Like, think first. It is all about the idea. It's you've got to have the idea. The struggle, bad writing, and difficult writing comes from not knowing what you're writing about. So figure out what you're writing, and that's often done through reading. So that's where it all kind of comes into a nice spherical object. But yeah, so read and write. You see what I mean? It's like the most boring, pointless advice in the world. But trust me, I'm a copywriter, and I've figured it out. I've got the secret.
You did have an impressive book collection behind you as well.
Yes, and you just buy books.
Lots of reading going on there.
Buy books. I remember once when I was very poor and I was still living in Grimsby, and I was an auditor, and I basically didn't have any money, got called into the bank, and the bank manager, it was like, it shows how old I am now, but the bank manager sat there and went, he looked through all my statements trying to like figure out how I could save money and like not be thinking. He went, and it was at the time I was buying him a person, so it's like Waterstones, $6.99, Waterstones, and the bank manager looked at him and went, you appear to only be spending money on books. And he goes, and I really don't want to like advise you not to buy books. And I was like, so what do I do? He goes, I don't know. So it was the most useless advice. Luckily I started making money, and so now I can buy books and I can use them as a tax expense, so it's okay. But yeah, buy books and read them, or borrow them, or steal them.
All that.
Don't steal.
Thank you so much, Glenn. That was all so many really useful, lots of
No problem.
practical tips there.
Thanks, Glenn.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was really useful.
Yeah, email and say hello online. Always welcome. I may ignore you, but otherwise, try.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Story of my life.
Say goodbye.
Bye. Enjoy your falafels.
Bye.
Thank you.